I am Joshua, I'm 28, and on my wedding day, not a single family member showed up. Not even my dad, who promised to stand by my side. Before I tell you about the 417 missed calls I woke up to on a billionaire's yacht, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I want you to picture the Mediterranean Sea just as the sun begins to crest over the horizon. It was a Tuesday morning in late July. The air coming through the open sliding glass doors of our cabin smelled of sea salt, expensive espresso, and absolute, pristine freedom. I woke up in a massive king-sized bed on a 180-foot motor yacht anchored off the breathtaking coast of Monaco. The sheets were woven from crisp Egyptian cotton. The floors were cool, polished marble, and my beautiful new wife, Elena, was still sound asleep next to me. Her breathing was steady, her face completely relaxed. It was the kind of morning that felt entirely detached from reality. A slice of paradise that I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I would ever experience. I stretched, enjoying the quiet hum of the yacht's engines deep below deck, and reached over to the mahogany nightstand. I just wanted to check the time. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen, and for a terrifying second, I thought the device had completely short-circuited. The screen was frozen. It wouldn't swipe. It wouldn't unlock. It just glowed with a solid, impenetrable wall of notifications. I had to force restart the phone just to get it to register my touch. When the home screen finally loaded, my heart instantly hammered violently against my ribs. 417 missed calls and text messages. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. When you see a number like that, your brain immediately goes to the darkest possible place. You don't get 417 notifications overnight unless the world is ending. I thought there had been a horrific car pileup. I thought someone's house had burned to the ground. I thought I was about to read about a tragedy so profound it would shatter my life. My hands actually trembled as I opened my Messages app. But then, my eyes finally focused on the names flashing frantically across the illuminated screen. My dad, my mom, my older brother Carter, Aunt Clara, cousin Sarah, Uncle Thomas. The panic in my chest instantly evaporated, replaced by a wave of absolute, freezing clarity. The exact same people who couldn't be bothered to send a single, solitary congratulations text on the day I got married, the day I stood in front of an altar looking at 35 empty chairs, were suddenly blowing up my phone like my house was on fire. I sat up on the edge of the bed, planting my bare feet on the cold marble floor, and started reading. My dad had left 23 missed calls and 11 sprawling text messages. The first one, sent at 2:14 a.m. his time, read, "Joshua, whose yacht is that?" The second one, sent 10 minutes later, read, "Call me back right now. What is going on?" The third was almost comical in its desperation. "I didn't know you were doing this well. Why didn't you tell us? We are family." My mom had left 18 calls. Her text messages were a frantic, breathless stream of consciousness. "Oh my God, Joshua. Is that Monaco? Are you okay? Whose boat is that? Did you win the lottery? Please call your mother. We need to celebrate when you're back." Celebrate. She wanted to celebrate. I stared at that specific word until the letters blurred. The woman who had explicitly and calculatingly chosen to attend a country club baby shower over watching her youngest son say his wedding vows now wanted to throw a party because she saw a picture of a luxury boat on the internet. Then came Carter. 7 missed calls. His texts were short, demanding, and dripping with his usual arrogance. "Wait, what?" Followed by, "Is your art actually selling now?" And finally, "We need to talk. Call me." I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to scream. I just sat there in the quiet luxury of that multimillion-dollar cabin, feeling a strange, profound sense of vindication wash over me. I scrolled through the endless stream of fake apologies and sudden, intense interest in my well-being, and I realized something fundamental. They didn't miss me. They missed the money they thought I suddenly had. To understand the sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of those text messages, to understand why I simply turned my phone on silent, tossed it into the nightstand drawer, and walked out to the balcony without replying to a single one of them, I have to take you back. I have to take you back 6 months before my wedding. Back to the exact moment I realized that in the Pharaoh family, loyalty wasn't something you earned by blood or love. It was something you bought. And my brother Carter always made sure he had the deepest pockets in the room. It was Thanksgiving dinner 6 months before the wedding. The sky over Connecticut was a bleak, slate gray, and the air was biting cold. Elena and I had driven 2 hours to my parents' house in our beat-up, 10-year-old Honda Civic. The heater only worked on one side, and the transmission slipped when you pushed it past 60, but it got us there. I had spent the entire morning baking a cherry pie from scratch, carefully weaving the lattice crust, while Elena picked out a nice, reasonably priced bottle of red wine that we could barely afford on our strict budget. We were sitting in my parents' living room, making polite, strained conversation with my father, when we heard it. The aggressive, unmistakable roar of a high-performance engine tearing up the quiet suburban driveway. I looked out the bay window. Pulling up to the curb was a brand-new, jet-black Porsche 911. The paint gleamed like wet glass. My brother Carter and his wife Chloe stepped out of the vehicle like they were descending onto a Hollywood red carpet. Carter is the golden child of our family. He's 3 years older than me, stands 2 inches taller, and possesses a smile that belongs on a luxury real estate billboard. He has a profound, almost terrifying ability to take credit for other people's hard work and charm his way out of any consequence. Chloe, his wife, comes from serious generational wealth. Her father owns a massive commercial real estate empire in Fairfield County. Just a month prior, her father had handed Carter a massive promotion, a vice president title and a salary that made my parents' eyes water with pride. Carter didn't earn that corner office. He married it. But in my family, marrying into wealth was considered the ultimate spectacular achievement. They walked through the front door, and the entire gravity of the house instantly shifted to accommodate them. My mother, Diane, practically sprinted down the hallway to take Chloe's coat, fawning over the designer label and complimenting the cut of the fabric. My father, Richard, a man who had spent his entire adult life working a mid-level bank job, constantly complaining about his own stagnant salary, clapped Carter on the shoulder with a level of enthusiastic reverence he usually reserved for professional athletes. At the dinner table, the dynamic was suffocating. Carter deliberately tossed his Porsche keys onto the center of the dining table, making sure the gold and black crest caught the light from the chandelier perfectly. He dominated the entire conversation, bragging loudly about his new exclusive golf club membership, the aggressive expansion of his stock portfolio, and the massive college fund he was already setting up for his unborn baby. He spoke in numbers, dropping figures that were meant to establish unquestionable dominance. Then, when there was a brief lull in his monologue, my dad turned his attention to me. He leaned over his plate of carved turkey, narrowing his eyes in a way that always made me feel like I was 12 years old and in trouble. "So, Joshua," my dad said, his voice dripping with that familiar, heavy condescension, "when are you getting a real job?" The table went dead, uncomfortably silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Elena shifted tensely next to me, her hand immediately dropping under the table to find my knee. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I have a job, Dad. I'm a painter. I just sold 2 large landscape pieces to a gallery downtown. Things are picking up." Carter snorted loudly, swirling his expensive glass of Cabernet. "Right? But painting doesn't pay a mortgage, little brother. You can't live in that drafty rented studio forever. Eventually, you have to cut your hair, put on a tie, and join the real world. You can't feed a family with a paintbrush." "At least he has someone," Chloe chimed in from across the table. She offered me a smile so utterly full of patronizing pity that it made my stomach physically churn. "It's sweet that you guys are making it work on so little. It builds character, right?" I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. A vein throbbed against my temple. I looked directly at my parents, waiting for them to say something, waiting for them to defend me, to remind Carter that success isn't exclusively measured by the emblem on your steering wheel or the size of your quarterly bonus. But my mother was busy pouring more wine into Chloe's glass, totally ignoring the insult, and my father just nodded in solemn agreement with my brother. I realized then, with absolute clarity, that I was invisible in that room. I wasn't their son. I was just the disappointing, eccentric younger brother who served as a convenient contrast to Carter's purchased greatness. I squeezed Elena's hand back under the table. We had each other. At that moment, I told myself that would have to be enough. Despite the absolute disaster of that Thanksgiving dinner, December brought the single happiest moment of my entire life. I asked Elena to marry me. There was no grand public spectacle. No flash mob, no hidden photographers, no massive diamond ring that cost a year's salary. I proposed on the paint-splattered floor of our cramped studio apartment in New Haven. It was late at night, the radiator was clanking loudly in the corner, and a heavy snow was falling outside the massive industrial windows. The room smelled strongly of turpentine, linseed oil, and old coffee. I had spent 3 weeks carving a ring out of a piece of reclaimed walnut wood, sanding it down until it was as smooth as glass. When I got down on one knee and asked her, her eyes instantly filled with tears. She pulled me down to the floor, laughing and crying all at once, kissing my face over and over. It was perfect. It was raw, and it was intensely real. We didn't want a massive, showy wedding. We couldn't afford one anyway, but even if we had the money, we didn't want the circus. We decided on a small, intimate garden ceremony in a historic coastal town about an hour away, set for June 14th. Just 40 guests, close family, a few good friends, and a retired local judge to make it official. The next morning, I called my parents to tell them the news. My mom answered the phone first. "Mom, Elena and I are engaged. We're getting married on June 14th. I told her, unable to keep the massive smile out of my voice. "Oh, that's nice, Joshua," she replied. Her tone was flat. Then, without missing a beat, she asked, "How much is this going to cost? You know your father and I can't foot the bill for a big party right now. Carter and Chloe are looking at houses, and we promised to help them with some interior design costs." That was her first reaction. Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Tell me about the proposal." Just the financial bottom line, immediately followed by prioritizing my wealthy brother. I swallowed the lump of disappointment in my throat. "We're paying for it ourselves, Mom. It's going to be very small. Can I talk to Dad?" When my father got on the line, I felt that familiar, desperate, pathetic childhood urge to make him proud of me. "Dad," I said, my voice actually shaking a little bit, "I'm getting married." There was a long pause on the line, the kind of silence that makes you acutely aware of your own heartbeat. Then he cleared his throat. "Well, congratulations, son. I know it's small, Dad. I know it's not a country club blowout, but it would mean everything in the world to me if you stood up there with me. I don't have a huge bridal party. I just want you. I want you to be my best man." I held my breath. For all his flaws, for all the times he overlooked me, for all the times he let Carter belittle me, he was still my dad. I wanted him there. I needed to know that, on the most important day of my life, he would have my back. "Of course, Joshua," he said, and for a fleeting second, his voice sounded genuinely warm, thick with actual emotion. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll be your best man. I promise you, son. I'll be standing right by your side." I hung up the phone feeling like I was walking on air. I ran over to Elena, picked her up, and spun her around the studio. I actually believed him. I let my guard down completely and allowed myself to believe that when it truly mattered, when the chips were finally down, my family would show up for me. I was so incredibly naive. The illusion of my family's support shattered into a million jagged pieces exactly 3 weeks before the wedding. I was standing in the middle of the studio, wearing a pair of paint-stained overalls, aggressively priming a massive canvas with white gesso. My phone rang from the table across the room. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked it up. The caller ID said, "Aunt Clara." Clara is my mother's older sister, and she is the undisputed, reigning gossip kingpin of the entire Farrow family. If someone gets a parking ticket, Clara knows the badge number of the officer before the ink is dry. She usually only called me to fish for information she could weaponize later. "Joshua, sweetie, how are you?" she chirped, her voice far too loud through the speaker. "How are the wedding preparations coming along?" "Good, Aunt Clara. Everything's pretty much set. We're just finalizing the flower arrangements." She launched into a long, rambling, breathless story about a neighbor's messy divorce. She spared no details, vividly describing a brutal custody battle over a golden retriever and a timeshare in Florida. I wedged the phone between my shoulder and my ear, making polite humming noises while I went back to working the heavy gesso into the weave of the canvas. Then she dropped the bomb. She did it so casually, with such breezy indifference, you would have thought she was asking if I preferred paper or plastic at the grocery store. "So, tell me, sweetie, are you and Elena going to make an appearance at Carter's party before your ceremony? Or are you just skipping it entirely? I know it's a tight squeeze." I stopped painting. The brush hovered midair, a thick glob of white primer dripping silently onto the hardwood floor. "What party?" I asked, my voice suddenly very quiet. "Carter and Chloe's baby shower, honey. Don't tell me you forgot. It's going to be absolutely massive." Chloe's dad rented out the entire main ballroom at the Grandview Country Club. "They have an ice sculpture, Joshua. An ice sculpture for a baby." A freezing cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. My chest tightened so fast I couldn't catch my breath. "When is it, Aunt Clara?" "June 14th. It starts right at noon." June 14th. My wedding day. I set the paintbrush down on the tray. My hands were physically shaking. "Aunt Clara, my wedding is at 3 o'clock on June 14th. The garden venue is over an hour and a half away from the Grandview Country Club. Nobody can go to both. It's geographically impossible." There was a dead, heavy, suffocating silence on the line. The kind of silence where the truth is suddenly glaring at both people. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Clara's head as she realized what she had just accidentally revealed. Oh, Joshua. I thought you knew," Carter said. "I thought you guys coordinated this." "Coordinated?" I spat out, the anger finally bubbling up like battery acid into my throat. "Carter has known my wedding date for 5 months. He received our Save the Date magnet in January. It's been on his refrigerator." Clara stammered, mumbled a panicked, incoherent excuse about leaving something burning on the stove, and hung up the phone. I stood there in the middle of my quiet studio, staring at the blank, white canvas. He knew. My brother absolutely knew. He had deliberately, maliciously booked his extravagant baby shower on the exact same day, at the exact same time, forcing the entire extended family to make a choice. And he knew exactly who they would choose. An hour later, the door to my studio didn't just open. It was practically kicked off its hinges. My best friend David stormed in. David is a heavy-duty diesel mechanic, built like a brick wall, with grease permanently embedded in his knuckles. He has hated my brother Carter with a burning passion since we were teenagers. He marched straight over to me, his face red with fury, and shoved his grease-smudged smartphone directly into my face. "Tell me you've seen this. Tell me you know what that psychopath is doing." I took the phone. The screen displayed a long series of screenshots from the extended family group chat, a chat I had apparently been quietly removed from 3 months prior. David's mother was distantly related to my mom, which meant David still had backdoor access to the digital family drama. I scrolled through the messages. With every single line I read, the floor seemed to drop further and further out from under me. Carter hadn't just accidentally double-booked the date. He hadn't just been careless. He had orchestrated a surgical, highly calculated campaign to isolate me and ruin my wedding. There was a direct message from Carter to my mom. "Mom, if you guys go to Joshua's little garden party instead of Chloe's shower, her parents are going to be incredibly insulted. You know they're paying for the country club. You know Chloe is hormonal. Do you really want to risk damaging our relationship with her family over a wedding that probably won't last anyway?" There was a message to my Aunt Clara and Uncle Thomas. "Hey guys, just a heads up, Chloe's dad is going to have some of his heavy-hitting corporate buddies at the shower. Might be a good networking opportunity for Thomas if he's still looking for that promotion. Don't waste the day standing in the dirt at Josh's thing. And then I saw the worst one. A direct message aimed squarely at my father. Dad, be smart about this. Chloe's father is looking over his estate planning and the investments he holds with your bank branch. If you embarrass Chloe on her big day by ditching the shower to go be Joshua's best man, it's going to cause a massive rift. You don't want to mess with my potential inheritance, and you definitely don't want to mess with your own retirement accounts. Joshua will get over it. He's used to things not going his way. Carter was literally threatening my father's future financial security. He was weaponizing his wealthy in-laws, dangling my father's retirement, his career standing, and the promise of future money like a carrot on a stick. I handed the phone back to David. My jaw was set so hard my teeth felt like they were going to crack. "They're not coming, man," David said quietly, his voice losing its usual rough, loud edge. He looked at me with deep, profound pity. "He bought them off. Every single one of them. It's a hostile takeover of your wedding." "I haven't heard from my dad yet," I said stubbornly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "He promised he'd be my best man." He looked me in the eye and gave me his word. David just sighed, wiping a hand across his face. "Joshua, don't do this to yourself. Look at the texts. He's got them terrified." But I had to know. I had to let them make the choice themselves. I wasn't going to call them crying. I wasn't going to beg for their presence. And I wasn't going to yell. I was just going to wait and see who actually valued me as a human being over a plate of free country club appetizers and the vague promise of proximity to wealth. The first official defection came from my own mother. She called me exactly 2 days after my agonizing conversation with Aunt Clara. When I answered, her voice was painfully bright, artificially sweet, and pitched an octave too high. The exact tone she always uses when she knows she's doing something terrible but desperately wants to manipulate you into making it easy for her. "Joshua, honey, how are you doing?" "I'm fine, Mom. What's up?" I asked, staring blankly at the wall of my studio. "Listen," she sighed, a heavy, deeply dramatic sound meant to convey how stressed she was. "We have a bit of a sticky scheduling conflict. It turns out Carter and Chloe's baby shower is on the 14th. Chloe's mother booked the country club, and you know how high-strung she gets. The deposit is non-refundable." "I know, Mom. It's the same day as my wedding. The wedding you've known about for 5 months, right?" "Exactly," she said, her pace quickening, rushing past my point. "And since it's Carter's first baby, it's the first grandchild of the family, Joshua. It's a huge, historic milestone. We really, really need to be there to support them. I was thinking, maybe you and Elena could just postpone your ceremony? Just push it back a few weeks? August is lovely for a garden wedding." I gripped the edge of the paint-splattered kitchen counter. My knuckles turned stark white. "Postpone my wedding? You want me to cancel my wedding, tell my vendors, tell Elena's family to change their flights, so you can go to a baby shower?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Joshua," she snapped, her fake sweetness instantly evaporating. "It's just a small garden thing anyway. It's not like you're losing tens of thousands of dollars in luxury venue deposits. Carter and Chloe have a lot of important people coming from her dad's firm. We have to keep up appearances. Important people. That was the magic phrase. That was the terrifying truth spoken aloud. What she really meant was, Chloe's parents pay for our country club access. Chloe's parents let us use their sprawling timeshare in Aspen. Carter pays for the expensive lease on your father's SUV. You, Joshua, give us nothing but handmade wooden gifts and pride. You have no financial leverage. Therefore, you do not matter." "I'm not changing my date, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to an eerily calm, icy register. "I am getting married on the 14th. You can either come to your son's wedding, or you can go eat miniature sandwiches at the golf course to impress a bunch of real estate developers. It's your choice." She gasped, highly offended that I had stripped away her polite excuses. "Joshua, how can you be so incredibly selfish? Your brother needs us. If you don't change the date, we can't come. Then don't come, I said, and I hung up the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just pressed the red button and put the device down on the counter. The invisible credit card had swiped, the transaction was approved, and my mother had officially been bought. As the wedding day drew closer, the excuses from the rest of the family rolled in like clockwork. Aunts, uncles, second cousins. One by one, they sent me weak, transparent text messages. A sudden, mysterious stomach bug. An unexpected work emergency that required weekend travel. A pre-planned vacation to Florida they had magically forgotten about until that exact moment. Out of the 30 extended family members I had excitedly invited, 28 had dropped out within 2 weeks. The only ones left on my side of the guest list were my dad, who remained terrifyingly, agonizingly silent, and my cousin Sarah. Sarah and I were close growing up. We were the two outcasts at family reunions, always surviving the agonizing political arguments by hiding in the basement and playing old video games. When I sent the final, desperate head count message to the remaining guests, Sarah texted me back almost immediately. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Josh. I bought a new dress and I'll be there early to help you set up the chairs. Love you. Felt like a massive victory. Felt like a lifeline. At least one person from my bloodline was choosing me. I proudly wrote her name at the top of the final seating chart. But 3 days before the wedding, my phone buzzed. It was a long text from Sarah. Josh, I am so incredibly sorry. My transmission just blew on the highway. My car is totally dead. The mechanic says it's going to cost $3,000 to fix, and I don't have the money for a rental car to get to Mystic. I'm going to have to miss the wedding. I'm literally crying right now sitting on the side of the road. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I felt a pang of genuine, deep sympathy. I knew she worked a low-paying retail job. I almost texted her back offering to pay for an Uber, even though Elena and I couldn't really afford a 2-hour ride. But 10 minutes later, David walked into the studio. He didn't say a word. He looked furious. He just opened his laptop, slammed it down on my work table, and pulled up Chloe's public Instagram page. There was a photo posted exactly 5 minutes ago. It was a picture of Chloe, her rich sorority sisters, and my cousin Sarah. They were standing in a high-end designer boutique in downtown Hartford, holding crystal champagne flutes and laughing. The caption read, "Dress shopping for the big shower with the best girls. So glad Sarah could make it. Hashtag baby Whitfield, hashtag spoiled. Sarah's car wasn't broken. She wasn't stranded on the highway crying over a blown transmission. She was sipping expensive champagne on Chloe's dime, happily buying a designer dress for the party that was specifically designed to destroy my wedding. Chloe had likely offered to pay for her outfit to secure her attendance." I stared at the glowing screen of the laptop, a hollow, bitter laugh escaping my chest. It was an absolute masterclass in betrayal. I didn't confront her. I didn't send an angry, explosive text message calling her a liar. I just walked over to my physical guest list tacked to the corkboard, took a thick red Sharpie, and drew a slow, dark, permanent line straight through Sarah's name. June 14th. Wedding morning. I woke up at 6 a.m. The weather was mocking me with its perfection. Through the window, I could see a crisp, clear, brilliant blue sky with a gentle, warm breeze rustling the trees. I should have been a bundle of nerves. I should have been excited, full of adrenaline, pacing the floor trying to remember my vows. Instead, my stomach was tied in thick, agonizing knots. It felt more like the morning of a funeral than a wedding day. I was standing in the bathroom, staring blankly at the mirror as I dragged a razor across my jaw, when my phone vibrated loudly against the porcelain sink. It was exactly 7 a.m. The caller ID simply read, "Dad." I stared at his name for a long time. My dad had ignored all of my text messages for a week. He hadn't confirmed if he was still coming. He hadn't asked what time he needed to be at the venue. I knew exactly what this call was. I could feel the betrayal radiating from the device. But I picked it up anyway, holding onto a microscopic shred of hope. "Joshua," he said. His voice was thin, weak, shaky. It was the undeniable voice of a coward who knows he's doing something utterly unforgivable. Dad. Son, I don't know how to say this. He cleared his throat loudly, stalling, buying time. Your mother is really, really upset. She feels like the family is being torn apart by all this drama. And Carter made a very good point. This is his first baby. It's a big deal for the family legacy. And the country club is so far from your venue. The traffic on I-95 is going to be a nightmare. He trailed off into pathetic silence, waiting for me to give him an out, waiting for me to absolve him, waiting for me to say, "It's okay, Dad. I understand. You have to go. Say it, Dad," I demanded, my voice harder and colder than it had ever been in my entire life. Be a man and say the words out loud. I can't make it to the wedding, Joshua. I'm sorry. I have to go to the shower with your mother. It's just politics, son. You know how Carter's in-laws are. They take offense to everything. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll take you and Elena out to a nice steak dinner next week to celebrate. A nice dinner. A piece of meat in exchange for abandoning his youngest son at the altar. I looked at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face was pale, drawn, but my eyes were locked in, burning with a new kind of intensity. I realized I wasn't just sad anymore. The sadness was entirely gone. It had burned away completely, leaving behind a cold, sharp, diamond-hard clarity. You promised me, I said evenly, not raising my voice a single decibel. You looked me in the eye and you gave me your word you would be my best man. Joshua, please, be reasonable, he pleaded, his voice cracking. It's not a huge, real wedding anyway. It's just a small gathering in a garden. Don't make this harder than it has to be. This is my only wedding day, Dad. There won't be another one. I gripped the edge of the sink. I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that when you had to choose between standing by your own son or kissing the ring of your other son's rich father-in-law to protect your portfolio, you chose the money. Do not call me again. Have a great time at the country club. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait to hear his pathetic excuses. I went to his contact, pressed block caller, washed the shaving cream off my face, and put on my suit. The venue we had chosen was a small, beautifully maintained community garden tucked behind a historic stone library in Mystic, Connecticut. The grass was impossibly green, almost glowing in the afternoon sun, and the air smelled heavily of blooming hydrangeas and salt water from the nearby coast. We had rented 42 white wooden folding chairs. They were set up perfectly in 6 neat rows on either side of a makeshift aisle. The aisle led up to an archway I had spent 3 weekends building myself out of salvaged driftwood and fresh eucalyptus branches. I arrived an hour early. I stood at the front of the aisle, looking back at the seating arrangement. 42 chairs, waiting for people who were never going to come. By 2:45 p.m., our tiny handful of true friends started to arrive. David was the first one there, wearing a sharp navy suit that stretched tight across his broad shoulders. He walked straight up to me, pulled me into a bone-crushing hug, and told me I looked like $1,000,000. Then came Dylan, a quiet guy I went to art school with, holding hands with his girlfriend. Then, 2 of Elena's closest co-workers from the bakery where she managed the front counter. And then, surprisingly, Harold arrived. Harold was our landlord, an eccentric, intensely quiet, 65-year-old man who lived in the dusty apartment above our studio. He usually wore worn-out, elbow-patched cardigans, drank cheap black coffee from a chipped mug, and occasionally drifted downstairs to look at my paintings. He would offer cryptic, brilliant advice like, "Push the shadow deeper in the corner," or "The light on that cheekbone is lying to you." I had dropped an invitation in his mailbox entirely out of politeness, never actually expecting him to show up. But there he was, walking into the garden wearing a flawlessly tailored vintage 3-piece gray suit that looked like it belonged on a movie star from the 1960s. He had a silk pocket square and polished leather shoes. By 3 p.m., the string music started playing softly from a portable speaker David had set up near the archway. I looked out at the crowd. 7 people. 7 people sat huddled together in the front 2 rows on the bride's side. Behind them, stretching out in a painful, visceral, agonizing visual representation of my family's betrayal, were 35 completely empty chairs. The afternoon wind moved softly through the garden, rustling the leaves of the oak trees, blowing across the stark, glaring white wood of the vacant seats. It was the quietest, most deafening silence I have ever experienced in my life. Every single empty chair was a message screaming at me. My mother, my father, my brother, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin Sarah. They all explicitly chose the country club. They all chose the money. The music shifted, the tempo slowing down to the bridal march. I pulled my eyes away from the rows of emptiness and looked toward the stone pathway at the back of the garden. Elena stepped out. She wore a simple vintage lace dress she had found at a thrift store and spent weeks altering herself by hand. She held a messy, beautiful bouquet of wildflowers we had picked the day before. The sunlight caught her hair, and she looked so breathtakingly, devastatingly beautiful that my chest physically ached. But she was walking alone. Her own father had passed away when she was in high school, and she was supposed to walk down the aisle toward me, where my father was supposed to be proudly standing by my side. Instead, we were 2 people entirely alone in the world, surrounded by a sea of empty white wood. Elena took her first tentative step down the aisle. Her smile was incredibly brave, radiating love, but I could clearly see the slight, nervous tremble in her hands as she gripped her bouquet. She kept her eyes locked entirely on me, desperately trying to ignore the glaring, humiliating void of the family side of the seating arrangement. I stood rigidly at the altar, my hands clutched tightly in front of me, fighting the overwhelming, suffocating urge to break down and cry. Then, something completely unexpected happened. Something that still brings tears to my eyes to this day. From the front row, Harold stood up. He didn't whisper a word to David or the others. He just stepped smoothly out of his row, buttoned his vintage suit jacket, and walked with slow, deliberate, incredibly dignified steps toward the back of the garden. He stopped right beside Elena. I watched, totally stunned, as this quiet, unassuming landlord offered his arm to my bride. Elena stopped. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. Harold smiled. A gentle, profound, fiercely protective fatherly smile that I had never seen from him before. He patted her trembling hand, gently tucked it into the crook of his arm, and together, they began walking down the aisle. When they reached the front, Harold didn't let go and go back to his seat. He turned to me, his expression shifting into something deeply serious and respectful. "Your father should be here," Harold said, his voice low and firm, carrying only far enough for Elena, the judge, and me to hear. "But since he isn't man enough to do it, someone who actually sees your value should be." He took a step back, moved to my right side, and formally took the position of the best man. He stood exactly where my father had promised to stand. A heavy, agonizing emotional weight broke wide open inside my chest. I looked over at David, who was fiercely wiping a tear from his eye while giving me a sharp, affirming nod. I looked at Elena, who was openly weeping tears of profound gratitude. And I realized in that exact, crystal-clear moment that family is absolutely not defined by blood. Blood just makes you biologically related. Loyalty, respect, and choosing to show up when it counts the most. That is what makes you family. The judge cleared his throat, gave Harold a respectful nod, and the ceremony began. We said our vows. We exchanged the wooden rings I had painstakingly made. We promised to choose each other, to protect each other, every single day, no matter what the world threw at us. And when the judge finally pronounced us husband and wife, those 7 beautiful people sitting in the front row stood up and cheered so loudly, so fiercely, that it filled the entire garden. For 12 glorious minutes, those 35 empty chairs didn't matter at all. After the ceremony concluded, we didn't have a massive reception hall booked with crystal chandeliers. We didn't have a 5-tier fondant cake or a professional DJ with a light show. We simply moved to the stone patio area of the garden, ordered a dozen gourmet pizzas from a famous local spot down the street, and drank cold beer out of a massive plastic cooler David had hauled in from his truck. It was incredibly intimate. It was full of genuine, raucous laughter. Harold sat at a table with David, talking quietly about classic cars, while Elena and I danced barefoot on the soft grass to a playlist running off a phone connected to a Bluetooth speaker. But as the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows across the lawn, I sat down at one of the empty tables just to catch my breath. The adrenaline and pure joy of the ceremony were slowly fading, and the brutal reality of the day was creeping back into my mind. I pulled my phone out of my suit pocket. I knew I shouldn't look. It's like pressing on a deep bruise just to see if it still hurts. But I opened the Instagram app anyway. The very first thing that popped up on my feed was a post from Chloe. It was a massive carousel of 10 professionally edited, high-resolution photos. The Grandview Country Club looked like a movie set. There were massive towers of pink and blue balloons arching over the entrance, a towering champagne pyramid, a private string quartet playing in the corner. And there, proudly displayed in the third photo, was my family. My mother, holding a mimosa, head thrown back, laughing hysterically at something Chloe's wealthy, heavily Botoxed mother was saying. My father, wearing his best tailored suit, standing proudly next to Carter, looking incredibly thrilled as he held up a tiny, ridiculously expensive designer baby shoe for the camera. Cousin Sarah, miraculously recovered from her blown transmission, posing with a massive piece of cake and a gift bag. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people who matter most. Family is absolutely everything. #blessed #baby shower." I stared at the glowing screen until my eyes burned. Not a single one of them had sent me a text message. Not a quick thinking of you. Not a pathetic sorry we couldn't make it. They had completely, thoroughly erased me from their minds the absolute second the champagne started flowing and the networking began. I swiped to the next photo. I zoomed in on the background. Chloe's father was standing in the far corner, looking incredibly stressed, talking aggressively on his phone. His face was red. I noticed it briefly, wondering if he was dealing with his lawyer about a bad real estate deal, but I quickly swiped away. It didn't matter to me. They were in their wealthy, superficial world, and I was banished to mine. I felt a warm hand rest firmly on my shoulder. It was Harold. He was holding his phone in his other hand, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity. It looked more like intense calculation. "Don't let them ruin today, Joshua," Harold said quietly, his voice cutting through the distant sound of music. "I'm trying not to, Harold. It's just hard to accept that this is what they chose. They look so happy." Harold looked out over the rows of empty chairs, then down at his phone screen. I noticed he had a text thread open, filled with long, detailed paragraphs of text sent to a contact simply named Victor. "Sometimes," Harold said, his voice taking on a sharp, authoritative, incredibly powerful edge that did not match the cardigan-wearing landlord I knew. "People need to be shown exactly what they threw away. And sometimes, Joshua, the universe has a very, very funny way of balancing the scales." He tapped send on his phone, slipped it into his suit pocket, and gave my shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze. "Go dance with your beautiful wife. Your life is just beginning." I didn't know it then, sitting in the twilight of my pizza reception. I didn't know that Harold wasn't just sending a casual text to a friend. I didn't know that the quiet, unassuming old man who lived upstairs had just set off a massive, unstoppable chain of events that was going to completely obliterate my family's social standing, destroy my brother's inflated ego, and turn my entire world upside down in exactly 14 days. 2 weeks passed. For 14 days, my phone remained completely silent. Not a single member of my family reached out to see how the wedding went or to apologize for their absence. It was as if Elena and I had simply ceased to exist the moment they walked into that country club. We went back to our rented studio, I went back to painting, and Elena went back to the bakery. We survived on the quiet comfort of each other. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Harold came downstairs and knocked on our door. He wasn't wearing his vintage suit anymore. He was back in his worn-out cardigan, holding his chipped coffee mug. "Joshua, Elena," he said, his voice unusually formal. "I need you both to come upstairs to my apartment. There is something we need to discuss." I looked at Elena. She shrugged, wiping flour off her apron. We followed Harold up the narrow, creaking wooden staircase to the second floor. I had never been inside Harold's apartment before. When he unlocked the door and pushed it open, I completely stopped in my tracks. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a museum. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with custom bookshelves, packed with heavy art history volumes, auction catalogs, and biographies. But what caught my eye were the framed photographs lining the hallway. There was Harold, 30 years younger, standing next to Andy Warhol. There was Harold shaking hands with Jean-Michel Basquiat. There was Harold, in a sharp tuxedo, cutting the ribbon at a massive gallery opening in Manhattan. "Sit down," Harold said, pointing to a leather sofa in the center of the room. He walked over to a heavy oak desk and picked up a thick, manila envelope. He brought it over and set it on the coffee table right in front of me. "For 22 years, Harold began, taking a slow sip of his black coffee, "I was the senior director of the Brenton Gallery in Chelsea, New York. I represented some of the most successful contemporary artists in the world. I retired a decade ago to this quiet little building because I was tired of the noise. But I never stopped watching the market. And I never stopped looking for raw, genuine talent." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the information. Our quiet, eccentric landlord who fixed our leaky sink was a titan of the New York art world. "6 months ago, when you started working on that large landscape series, I took a few photographs of your canvases while you were out," Harold confessed, completely unapologetic. "I sent them to an old friend of mine. His name is Victor Ashland." My jaw practically hit the floor. Anyone who has ever picked up a paintbrush knows who Victor Ashland is. He is a billionaire private collector. Having Victor Ashland buy your work doesn't just put money in your pocket. It instantly legitimizes your entire career. It is the ultimate seal of approval. Victor doesn't just like your work, Joshua. He thinks you are the most exciting realist painter he has seen in 20 years. Harold reached down and opened the manila envelope. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, bound with a black clip, and slid them across the table. "This is an exclusive representation contract with Caldwell Gallery in Manhattan, backed directly by Victor Ashland's private funding. They want to commission 12 original pieces from you over the next 18 months. I reached out with a trembling hand and turned the first page. My eyes scanned the heavy legal jargon, searching for the bottom line. And then I saw it. Total contract value, $450,000. $450,000. I dropped the paper. I literally could not hold it. Elena let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. That wasn't just a salary. That was life-changing, generational money. It was more money than my father had made in his last 5 years at the bank combined. It was more than the promotion Carter loved to brag about. "Harold, I don't know what to say," I stammered, my vision actually blurring with tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," Harold said softly, leaning forward, "I wanted to see who you were when you had absolutely nothing. I watched your family strip away your dignity leading up to your wedding. I watched your father break his promise to you over money. I watched you stand at that altar with nothing but your integrity and the woman who loves you. You passed the test, Joshua. Now it's time to collect your reward." The very next morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown international number. When I answered, a deep, incredibly smooth voice spoke on the other end. "Joshua, this is Victor Ashland." I stood up so fast I knocked my chair over. "Mr. Ashland, it is an absolute honor to speak with you." "The honor is mine, son," Victor replied warmly. "Harold has told me everything about you. He also told me about your wedding day. I understand you and your beautiful bride didn't exactly get the celebration you deserved. Your family made a very poor investment choice." "You could say that, sir." "Well, I like to correct bad investments," Victor said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. My private yacht, the Meridian, is currently anchored off the coast of Monaco. I have a full staff on board, but I won't be using it for the next 2 weeks. I want you and Elena to pack your bags. My assistant has already booked you 2 first-class tickets to Nice. Consider it a signing bonus. Go enjoy your honeymoon. I couldn't even form the words to politely decline. It was an offer from another universe. 3 days later, Elena and I were sitting in massive leather seats at 30,000 feet, sipping champagne, flying away from the miserable, petty drama of my family. When we landed in France, a private driver picked us up and took us directly to the marina. The Meridian wasn't just a boat. It was a floating palace. 180 feet of gleaming white fiberglass and dark teak wood. We had a private chef, a massive suite with panoramic views of the Mediterranean, and a level of peace I had never experienced in my entire life. For the first few days, we didn't look at our phones. We didn't talk about Carter or Chloe or my father. We just swam in the crystal clear water, ate incredible food, and sat on the deck under the stars, completely overwhelmed by the radical turn our lives had taken. But as we sat on the upper deck on our 4th evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, a specific thought crept into my mind. I thought about the 35 empty chairs. I thought about the photo Chloe posted of my family laughing at the country club, acting like I didn't exist. I realized I didn't want to hide my joy. I didn't want to keep this a secret. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the camera. I told Elena to stand near the glass railing, the sprawling, illuminated coastline of Monaco directly behind her. She was wearing a beautiful white silk dress I had bought for her at a boutique in Nice. I stepped into the frame next to her, wrapping my arm around her waist. On the glass table right in front of us, perfectly in focus, was a bottle of vintage champagne and the thick, glossy Caldwell Gallery contract with my name printed boldly on the front page. I snapped the photo. It was perfect. The lighting, the background, the undeniable, overwhelming proof of our success. I opened Instagram. I hadn't posted anything in months. I uploaded the picture and typed a very simple, very deliberate caption. Honeymooning in Monaco, celebrating my new $450,000 gallery representation. Massive thanks to the people who actually showed up for us when it counted. The best is yet to come. I didn't tag my parents. I didn't tag Carter. I just hit publish, set my phone on the table, and poured another glass of champagne. It was 9 p.m. in Monaco. That meant it was mid-afternoon back in Connecticut. Prime scrolling time. I left my phone on the table and went to dinner with Elena. When we came back to the cabin a few hours later, I picked up the device. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this story, my phone screen was completely frozen. 417 missed calls and text messages. The notification feed was a desperate, panicked blur of my family's names. My dad, my mom, Carter, Sarah. The people who treated me like dirt on their shoes were suddenly treating me like royalty, simply because I posted a number with a $sign in front of it and a geolocator in Europe. I sat on the edge of the massive king-sized bed, the cool Mediterranean breeze blowing through the open doors, and I finally decided to read the messages. They were pathetic. My father's text shifted from demanding to know whose boat I was on, to begging for a phone call, to claiming he always knew I had it in me. My mother's messages were a masterclass in gaslighting. Joshua, we are so incredibly proud of you. We knew you just needed time to find your footing. Please call us. We want to throw a massive dinner party for you and Elena when you get back to the States. Carter's texts were the most satisfying. The sheer panic in his words was palpable. His entire identity was built on being the richest, most successful person in the room. And suddenly, his little brother, the struggling artist he mocked at Thanksgiving, was sitting on a billionaire's yacht with a massive gallery contract. "Call me back," he demanded. "We need to talk about this gallery thing. Is it legitimate? Don't sign anything without letting my lawyer look at it." I took a deep breath. I didn't reply to them individually. I didn't want a conversation. I wanted to deliver a verdict. I opened the extended family group chat, the same chat David had shown me, the one they used to conspire against my wedding. I realized they must have quickly re-added my number in their panic to reach me. I typed out one single message. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just laid out the cold, undeniable facts. "I see you all saw my post. Yes, the contract is real. Yes, we are in Monaco on a private yacht. I find it absolutely fascinating that my phone has been dead silent for the last 16 days. But the second you see a luxury boat and a six-figure contract, I suddenly have a family again. Dad, you broke your promise to be my best man so you could protect your investments with Chloe's father. Mom, you told me to cancel my wedding for a baby shower. Carter, you threatened the entire family to boycott the best day of my life just to feed your own ego. You all made your choice on June 14th. You chose money over me. So please respect my choice now. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not pretend you are proud of me. You are not my family anymore. Enjoy the country club." I hit send. I watched the little delivered indicator pop up under the text block. Then I went to the settings, removed myself from the group chat, and blocked every single one of their numbers. The silence that followed was the most peaceful, liberating feeling I have ever experienced. I had finally cut the anchor and I was free. When we returned to New York, the real work began. I had 18 months to deliver 12 massive paintings for my solo exhibition at Caldwell Gallery. I poured every ounce of my soul, my pain, and my newfound freedom into those canvases. I called the exhibition The Seventh Chair. The opening night was in early November. Caldwell Gallery is located in the heart of Chelsea, and when Elena and I pulled up in a town car provided by the gallery, there was a line out the door. Collectors, art critics, and wealthy buyers were crammed into the space, holding expensive wine, staring at my work. But there was one painting that commanded the entire room. It was the centerpiece of the exhibition, hanging on a massive white wall entirely by itself. I titled it simply, June 14th. It was a hyper-realistic, massive oil painting of the garden venue in Mystic. The lighting was beautiful, bathed in golden afternoon sun. But the focus of the piece was the seating. I painted the 42 white folding chairs. In the front row, I painted the backs of 7 people. Elena, David, Harold, and our friends. And stretching out behind them were 35 perfectly rendered, devastatingly empty white chairs. I painted every shadow, every blade of grass beneath them. You could practically feel the cold wind blowing through the vacant space. It was a monument to my family's betrayal, immortalized on canvas for the entire world to see. A prominent art critic from the New York Times stood in front of the painting for 20 minutes. The next morning, the Sunday edition of the Times ran a massive feature on the exhibition. The headline read, "The Deafening Silence of Empty Chairs. Joshua Delaney's Masterpiece of Familial Betrayal." The article detailed the exact story behind the painting. It talked about the brothers' baby shower at a country club. It talked about the father who refused to be the best man. It didn't use their full names, but in the affluent circles of Connecticut where my family desperately tried to fit in, everyone knew exactly who the article was about. Aunt Clara, before I completely cut her off, had frantically emailed David, complaining that Carter and Chloe were being laughed out of their country club. People were whispering behind their backs. The golden boy had been exposed as a petty, jealous tyrant, and my parents were revealed as shallow social climbers who abandoned their own son. The painting sold that night to a private collector in London for $120,000. They say karma is a mirror, but I think it's more like a wrecking ball. It takes its time swinging back, but when it hits, it destroys the entire foundation. About 4 months after the gallery opening, the Connecticut real estate market took a brutal, unexpected downturn. I heard the news from David, who still kept an ear to the ground in our hometown. Chloe's father's commercial real estate firm, the massive empire that funded my family's arrogance, was heavily overleveraged. He had bet millions on 3 massive strip mall developments that completely stalled due to zoning issues and dried up funding. In late February, the firm officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The fallout was instant and catastrophic. Carter, whose high-paying vice president job was entirely dependent on his father-in-law's company, was laid off immediately. The massive salary was gone. The corporate credit cards were shut down. 2 weeks later, David sent me a photo he took while driving past Carter's sprawling house. The driveway was empty. The jet-black Porsche 911 had been repossessed. The financial collapse didn't just hit Carter. It sent a shockwave directly into my parents' living room. Carter had been paying the expensive lease on my dad's SUV. Chloe had been letting my mom use her supplementary credit card for expensive salon trips and dinners out. The anticipated inheritance, the entire reason my father abandoned me at the altar, had vanished into thin air, swallowed by corporate lawyers and bankruptcy courts. The people who worshipped money suddenly found themselves entirely broke. I was standing in my new studio, washing brushes in the sink, when I heard my phone ring. It was a local Connecticut number I didn't recognize. I answered it cautiously. "Hello, Joshua. Please don't hang up." It was my dad. His voice wasn't just weak this time. It was completely broken. It sounded like he had aged 20 years in 6 months. He must have borrowed a friend's phone to bypass my block. "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any anger or warmth. "Son, things are really bad here," he said, his breath hitching. "Carter lost his job. Chloe's dad lost everything. They're talking about foreclosing on Carter's house. And your mother and I, we're struggling. I took a pay cut at the bank, and without Carter helping us out with the car payments, we might lose our house too." He paused, waiting for me to step in, waiting for the newly wealthy, successful son to play the hero. "I heard," I said simply. "Joshua, I saw the article in the Times. I know you got that massive contract. I know you have the money. Please, son. We are your family. We are desperate. We just need a loan to keep our heads above water. Just until Carter finds a new position." I turned off the water in the sink. The silence in my studio was heavy, but it wasn't the agonizing silence of the empty chairs at my wedding. It was the peaceful silence of a man who finally holds all the cards. "Dad," I said, my voice incredibly steady. "6 months ago, I begged you to stand next to me on the most important day of my life. I begged you to be my best man. And you told me you couldn't, because you needed to protect your investments with Chloe's dad. You told me it was just politics. I was wrong, Joshua. I was so wrong. I'm sorry," he cried into the phone. "I know you are," I replied. "But I'm going to tell you the exact same thing you told me that morning. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I am not your backup plan, Dad. I am your son, and you treated me like I was completely optional. You chose your team. Now you have to play for them. Joshua, please." "Goodbye, Dad." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel a surge of evil joy. I didn't feel a thrill of revenge. I just felt a profound, heavy sense of closure. The scales were balanced. An hour later, the same unknown number called back. I knew exactly who it was. I answered it, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the table. "You selfish, arrogant little prick," Carter's voice spat through the speaker, trembling with absolute, unhinged rage. "Hello, Carter. How's the Porsche?" I asked casually. "Shut your mouth," he screamed. "You think you're so incredible now, don't you? Sitting in your fancy studio with your millionaire friends while your own parents are about to lose their house? You have the money to fix this, Joshua. You owe us." "I don't owe you a single dime," I said, leaning over the table. "You spent my entire life treating me like a failure. You deliberately booked your ridiculous country club party on my wedding day just to prove you could control the family. You threatened Dad's retirement so he wouldn't show up for me. You built your entire life on someone else's money, Carter, and now that it's gone, you have absolutely nothing to show for it. "You got lucky," Carter yelled, his voice cracking, the polished, arrogant facade totally disintegrating. "That's all it was. Some old landlord felt sorry for you. You're still the same pathetic loser painting in a basement. You didn't earn any of this." I listened to him scream, his jealousy completely consuming him. He couldn't handle the fact that my success was built on my own talent, while his success was built on a fragile house of cards that had just violently collapsed. "I earned my life, Carter," I said quietly. "You bought yours and then you lost the receipt. Don't ever call this number again." I hung up, blocked the new number, and walked out of the studio. 6 months later. It was a beautiful Sunday morning in early May. I was standing on the back porch of a massive, beautiful 4-bedroom house in Westport, Connecticut. The property sat on 2 acres of land, bordered by heavy oak trees and a winding creek. The bottom floor was a sprawling, custom-built art studio with massive skylights. I bought the house in cash. No mortgage, no help from anyone. Just the money I earned from my own 2 hands and a paintbrush. Elena was out in the backyard, wearing a sun hat, planting rows of fresh lavender in the garden. She looked up at me and smiled, wiping dirt from her forehead. We were happy. We were truly, deeply happy. I heard a car pull into the long gravel driveway. I walked around to the front of the house. It was Harold driving his old, beat-up Volvo. He stepped out of the car holding a bottle of expensive red wine, smiling warmly. He came over every Sunday for dinner. He wasn't just my landlord anymore. He was the closest thing I had to a real father. But right behind Harold's car, another vehicle slowly pulled into the driveway. It was a battered, 10-year-old sedan. The driver's side door opened, and my father stepped out. He didn't look angry. He didn't look demanding. He looked incredibly small, wearing an old flannel shirt, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He walked slowly up the driveway, stopping a few feet from the porch. I stood there, my hands in my pockets, waiting. "I didn't come to ask for money, Joshua," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Carter and Chloe moved into a small apartment in Stamford. Your mother and we downsized. We sold the house. We're renting a small place in town." I just nodded, absorbing the information. He reached into the front seat of his car and pulled out a small, dusty cardboard box. He walked up the steps and set it gently on the porch railing. "I was packing up the attic," he said, looking down at his worn-out shoes. "I found these, your old art awards from high school, the ribbons, the certificates. I put them in a box years ago and forgot about them." He finally looked up at me, and I saw genuine tears pooling in his eyes. Not tears of manipulation, but tears of profound, agonizing regret. "I sat in a country club eating tiny sandwiches while my son got married to empty chairs," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I traded my son for a seat at a table that doesn't even exist anymore. I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to bring you your awards. You earned them." He turned around and started walking slowly back to his car. I watched him go. I felt a pang of sadness, a dull ache in my chest for the relationship we could have had, if he had just been a little braver. But I didn't stop him. I didn't call him back. Forgiveness isn't a switch you just flip. It's a bridge, and right now, the bridge between us was completely burned. I picked up the dusty box of my old awards, turned around, and walked back into the bright, warm sunlight of my own home, where my real family was waiting for me. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long journey, but I hope this resonated with you in some way. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, where you had to walk away from toxic family members to protect your own peace? Let me know down below. And for those of you who made it to the very end of this video, you belong to a special group. I want you to comment the letter W down below. W stands for winner. That is our secret code. It lets me know that you are part of the 1% club, the amazing people who stayed with me until the very last second. Please hit that like button, and make sure you follow the channel so we can stay connected. I have so many more stories to share with you all. Until next time, stay strong, know your worth, and never let anyone treat you like an option.